It's the final word story time, 164. I'm Adam Collins. Jeff's only about 150 kilometres from me. He's in Melbourne. I'm down at my parents' place on the farm in Birregurra a few days before Christmas. When you're listening to this, it will be a couple of days before 2024. Who knows? It might be morning 5 at the MCG, Australia-Pakistan. We might be on the cusp of a tie. Or Australia might have won in 2.5 days, and we've all had 2 days doing something different. Hello, Jeff. We're in the time machine.
We're in the multiverse. We're in the everything everywhere all at once world. Anything could have happened. I'm guessing Hassan Ali will have been picked, given that they're pretty much out of bowlers. They probably had to pick him after we discussed him on Storytime last week. But whether that will have made a material difference to the likely result, I don't know. You don't know. Here we are. Maybe the whole thing's been washed out and abandoned. I don't know. Maybe there was an asbestos problem at the MCG and everybody got sent outside. I'm not suggesting that will happen, but we don't know. This is the future. Is not written, as Sarah Connor carved into the wooden tabletop. No fate, no fate.
This is the thing that we can write an entire alternative history of the Test match that is about to start in 4 days' time. I say about to start, still quite a journey between now and Boxing Day, and we could publish that. We could, like that television show I keep watching at the moment, For All Mankind, which theorises that the Russians landed on the moon first and does an entire alternative history based on that premise, and it's quite good. You'd probably enjoy that, Jeff. We could do the whole thing. Maybe they've dug up the pitch. Maybe someone has broken in through the Hugh Trumbull Cafe, a protest that Nathan Lyon's receiving all this adulation rather than the Great Trumbull, and has seen fit to destroy the next Test match.
Maybe Asad Shafiq has made a comeback. Batted at 6, made 600, overtaken Ben Stokes' tally of Test runs at number 6. The heart wants what the heart wants.
We should be so lucky. Jeff, we should crack on more or less straight away because
why not?
The whole idea of this is getting an episode in the can that we can roll out when we're too busy to record a story time, and it being near Christmas, we're both busy boys. Lot going on at the moment. So let's park any meaningful preamble and simply say that we're about to play a little bit of
Nerd Pledge! Nerd Pledge. You can really give it a bit bigger when you're sitting on the balcony, which I am, on a beautiful late afternoon in Melbourne. One of the consolation days, one of the ones where after it's been cold and rainy and shithouse, the sun comes out, you get the golden hour, it makes the new leaves on the trees glow with that heavenly green that seems to belong to some better plane of existence, one that has been promised to us, one where we may end up one day. And the sun is streaking across the grass. There's a little chirping of some birds in the trees, and all is well with the world. It's time to sing out Nerd Pledge. All is not well with the world. World's fucked. We know that. But at least in this very specific corner of the world, things feel good. Nerd Pledge is a game that we play with nice people who listen to this show, and they decide that they are going to help fund it, and they do that. They send through their contributions, not in normal denominations of currency, but very specific ones, because the number relates to cricket in some way, and we have to figure it out. Richard Jones, for instance, has sent through £3.27. So the number is 327. It comes with a clue. It doesn't have to, but it does in this case. He says, this relates to a Hampshire player you mentioned in another Nerd Pledge answer a few months ago. You didn't know anything about him, so now is your chance to find out. P.S. My English teacher used to go out with him. Well, that's nice.
I like that extra bit of detail. I wrote this answer up on the flight today from Hobart to Melbourne before jumping in the car next to Winnie, and just noting that, as you describe your setting there, my setting here, when I walked in, my parents have gone full Griswolds inside the house, because this will be the first Christmas Winnie can really sink her teeth into, nearing 4 years of age. So we're about to get on that roller coaster. We had our photo with Father Christmas the other day, and all feels well in the world at our end too, purely on the basis of how excited she is. So yes, Winnie has seen me writing this answer for Richard. Now, this is our second Richard Jones, Jeff. Of course, we've got the other one, who I'm pretty sure is a Worcestershire fan, isn't he? So the two Richard Joneses in our crew, which I suppose is to be expected, given they're both relatively common names. I am going to note for you, Jeff, that one Devon Conway made an unbeaten 327 on the way to playing Test cricket. He made that for Wellington against Canterbury in 2019. But that really has nothing to do with Hampshire. I just thought it was interesting that Devon Conway, upon arriving in New Zealand, was making those big scores straight away. This took me a little while to get
unless you could link it somehow between Devon and Hampshire. I don't know. This is
the sandwich meat.
The luncheon meat. It doesn't translate. I've made Devon jokes in the UK before, and they don't. Obviously, they must call it something else. That weird fake pressed meat that gets like squashed into a roll. That's probably not meat per se, but it's all the leftover bits that get ground up into a paste and then extruded in that shape, and they feed it to you with tomato sauce and white bread in sandwiches when you're a child in the 1980s or 90s. Disgusting stuff. Absolute abomination on the face of culinary enterprise. But is it for something? Does that ring true for you as someone who's relocated? I imagine there's a lot of vocab you use that just doesn't fly in the UK.
That's true. I mean, we definitely did the beef luncheon with sauce sandwiches as kids. My dad's pretty handy on these matters, but for whatever reason, that was a staple when we were perhaps living a more simple existence in the outer southeast suburbs in the 90s. They were in their 20s, bringing up my brother and I, and a bit of beef luncheon, bit of sauce was going to keep us happy. So I have fond memories of that. And you still kind of go into town, don't you? The Don is good cylinders when you make your way into Melbourne from the west, as I did on the train a couple of weeks ago. But no, we're not talking about Devon Conway and ham. So with this one, you'll like this, Jeff. So this links back, I believe, in fact, I'm certain it links back to a game that you interviewed Jeremy Coney about in the back of the SEN commentary box. So you recall, Jeff, that you were doing a nerd pledge about, I can't remember what exactly, but it pertained to New Zealand.
That he played in where he was run chasing as he did faultlessly. Jeremy Coney was never dismissed in a winning run chase for New Zealand.
You're quite right. So it was Adelaide 1983, the January of 1983. New Zealand was set 297, which was impossible in 1983, and they haul it down with Coney making an unbeaten 47 at the end. Hadley made quick runs as well. But in the first innings of that match, England made 296 with a Gower century. Now guest and friend of the pod, David Ivor Gower. But the other player who you referenced in your answer, this is where I didn't quite get the clue originally. I'm like, Hampshire player I knew nothing about. Like it doesn't sound like the sort of words that would come out of my mouth. They came out of your mouth. The Hampshire player who you were unsure about the history of was a chap by the name of Trevor Jesty.
Yes.
Who made 52 not out in 35 balls.
Yeah, I'd never heard of him. It was one of those ones where I was like, I literally have no concept that this player existed.
And nor did I. And nor did I. And I realise now I probably should have. Like he played in a really interesting era of county cricket in a really strong side, but on account of the fact that his only England opportunities were in the summer of 82, 83 in Australia, he kind of fell off the radar as quickly as he came on the radar, I suppose. So, this in a way is the perfect pledge, going full circle, linking back to something we've spoken about and gives us a chance to colour in some of the gaps. This was Jesty's 7th one-day international out of 10. They were all played in that tri-series between Australia, New Zealand and England in the summer of 82, 83. And he never did better than that 52 not out in 35 balls. He bowled in 4 matches, only took 1 wicket, and that was it. But, there's some really interesting stuff here. This was when he was 35 years of age. So, you kind of think of an all-rounder who gets one chance overseas. You might think they're 23 or something. This guy had a proper full-on career. Jets, as he was known, was born on the 2nd of June, 1948 in Hampshire, the invincible summer. And me being me, I was curious, what were the Australians doing on the 2nd of June, 1948? Well, what do you know? They were playing at Hampshire. So on the day he was born in Hampshire, down the road at Southampton, they were hosting Bradman's Invincibles, although not quite Bradman's Invincibles because he wasn't playing. Hassett was the stand-in captain, as he was quite often in that tour. Bradman being the oldest member of the touring party and all the rest of it. And this was one of the best chances a side had of beating Australia, by the way, in 48, Hampshire. They made 195, the home side, but Australia are bowled out for 117. But then Hampshire are bowled out for 103 in their second innings. Keith Miller, 5 for 25, of course. And they're set 182 on the final afternoon, and they haul it down for the loss of 2 wickets inside 45 overs, I think it was, with Bill Brown unbeaten 81 at the end. So, very different time though, right? Like, he plays international cricket in 1983, but he's born at a time of rations. He's born in the immediate post-war era, when life would have been so very, very different to other players in that team who would have been born, as late as the early 60s, who had a very He would have had a very different upbringing in 60s and 70s England compared to what he knew in the late 40s, or I suppose in his case, by the time he was aware of his surrounds, the early 50s. He actually started playing first-class cricket as a teenager in 1966, so 17 years before he makes his England bow, and has a fantastic county career. He's capped in 1971, and he's really important in that famous county championship win that Hampshire have in 1973. He takes 35 wickets at 20, makes some runs. They win the John Player League, the one-day league, in 1975, and again in 1978, and he's front of house in both of those sides. He's not a tall guy, he's 5'10", but he's a seaming all-rounder. He's more known for his batting than his bowling, but in one-day cricket, he's quite important, having a batter who can bowl his complement of overs. There's an expectation in this late 70s era, when one-day cricket's starting to really pick up, there's more matches being played, that he'd get a chance with England. But for whatever reason, through what you'd call now the prime of his career, he was consistently overlooked for higher honours. That's until a monster 1982, where he makes 1,645 runs at 58 with 8 centuries in the championship.
Wow. And
combines that with 31 wickets. It's enough to make him one of the Wisden Five in 1983 and the aforementioned England trip, the winter of 82-83. So 10 one-dayers down there. Sadly, no test matches. You remember it was one squad back in that era. But his average of 21 with the bat and 1 wicket with the ball meant that he didn't make the World Cup squad of 1983. But just to go back to his domestic stuff for a sec here, what a great era at Hampshire. In 1983, when he returned from that trip to Australia, in a one-day game, he put on 269 unbeaten with Gordon Greenwich. He made 166 of those, our man Jesty. Malcolm Marshall's there. In 1976, he's second in the bowling averages to Andy Roberts. But there's another player in that squad as well who we know quite well, Mark Nicholas. And the two of them were vying for the captaincy in 1984 for the summer of 85. And Nico got the job, and Jesty wasn't best pleased about that, so he left his club. Having played there from 1966 to 1985, he sought a new career in his, by this stage, late 30s at Surrey. Had 3 good years down at the Oval, and when he was finished there, when he, what did you do when you left the all-you-can-eat seafood restaurant? You went, we went looking for another all-you-can-eat restaurant for the next 3 hours. And what did you do when you couldn't find one after 3 hours? We went fishing. Does this sound like a man who had all he could eat? Well, in this case, Jesty had not had all he could eat as yet. So after Surrey, he went up the motorway and moved to Lancashire for a few more seasons. So he's in his 40s, right? Then they win back-to-back one-day trophies. Back-to-back, I haven't got the name of the sponsor's name that it was in those years.
I think it was the Ryobi Cup at that point.
The Ryobi Mercantile Mutual McDonald's FIA Cup. They won both in 1988 and 1989, back-to-back, just like Hawthorn. Lancashire back-to-back in 88 and 89. And Jesty was the top scorer in the final in 1988. So I suppose he was the Gary Ayres of that. Sorry, again?
He's the Darren Stevens of his era.
Yeah, that's right. So I don't know if he was best on ground. Maybe as the leading goal scorer in the 88 grand final. There was a Dunstall Abbott Burton where they kicked 7, 6 and 5 respectively in that grand final massacre of Melbourne. Anyway, I digress. So he's still playing full season in 1990 at 43 or something like that, or turning 43. And then he goes on to finish in 1991. I wonder how many first-class cricketers spanned the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s. I'm pretty sure Chris Tavares did. I've got a recollection of Tavares playing until 1993 when Trescothic made his debut and they cross over beautifully. In the back of my mind, I feel like Tavares goes back to 1969 or something like that.
Oh,
but there can't be many.
He's got a bigger span than Gold FM at this point. That's incredible.
It's more double TFM, isn't it? 67. Oh, no. Gold originally was 60s, 70s, and today, 60s, 70s, and 80s, or whatever it was.
Yeah, it was. But then, you see, unfortunately, time moves on, Adam. There's a real tragedy to if you flip across a Gold, a 104, whatever, Gold FM thing, you at this point hear songs from about 2005, and it makes you feel very sad and very ancient because those are old songs now. Those are as long ago as the songs of the 70s were in the 1990s. So
you flick it over
turn it
and
on.
you
hear "Dirty" by Christina Aguilera.
You flick it over and you hear "System of a Down" Chop Suey on Gold 104.
Yeah, exactly. Vintage. The vintage. You hear the bass line of a Franz Ferdinand track, and you collapse weeping. You hear "Is This It" by The Strokes, being played on Gold 104 probably these days. Who knows? I heard Smashing Pumpkins was getting around the other night. I mean, things. These are moments in our lives that slip through our fingers.
At best, they should be on double T. They don't know about gold.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's a modern tragedy right there of Melbourne radio. So his career runs from 1966 till 1991. Think about them.
Yep.
The degree to which the world changed. Like 66 is Revolver, and 1991 is when the Soviet Union ends. Like there's a lot of shit that's happened in the time he's a professional cricketer.
66 is decimal currency in Australia, and 91 is this is the recession that Australia had to have.
66 might be the election. No, it was 69 when Paul Keating went into the parliament, and 91 when his prime minister, taking over as prime minister in December of 91, just around the time of the recession we had to have. Anyway, no more political geekery for today, at least not in this answer. All up, Jesty scored 1,000 runs in a season on 10 occasions, averaged 35. Averaged 33. And made 35 first-class hundreds. So a really important sort of career. On top of that, 585 wickets at 27. So a serious all-rounder. In list day cricket, 7 centuries and a further 372 wickets. Some of that domestic career was played in South Africa and New Zealand, where he spent some winters. I'm not sure which era he was in South Africa. That might muddy the water somewhat. But he played a little bit of domestic cricket down there, and which wasn't uncommon for England pros to travel to South Africa and New Zealand in that era. And a lot of team success as well, both at Hampshire in one era in the early to mid-70s, then Lancashire, just as they started winning all those trophies in the 90s. The nucleus of that, I suppose, was in the late 80s when he was getting about. He moved into umpiring. You'll like all of this, Jeff. After his cricketing career, he moved into umpiring pretty much straight away and gave it a real go for a long time. I reckon based on the time he's retired, he's probably a contemporary of Bumble when Bumble's umpiring at first-class level before he becomes the coach of Lancashire. He never won men's test honours, but he was the 4th umpire in the 2006 test match at the Oval between England and Pakistan, with Darryl Hare accused Pakistan of ball tampering, and they never returned to the field. So he was an official in one of the more controversial test matches ever played. I went back and read the Andrew Miller Cricinfo text commentary of that a few years ago, and text commentary really captures the drama of a situation when it's like an unfolding story, and Miller did a good job of summing up just how dramatic that all was when Pakistan forfeited a test match, and our man Jesty here was the 4th umpire. We should be so lucky, Jeff, to get a game end like that in the time we're covering cricket. Anyway, he did 3 one-dayers, he did a bunch of women's internationals, all up 189 first-class matches umpired, 273 list day, and 100 T20s just for good measure. And in keeping with that sort of controversial bent, he did umpire in the ICL in 2007 when it started. So I'm not sure if he got threatened with a ban, but he did get back, and you'll like how this comes full circle as well. He did get back to umpiring county cricket. Indeed, he cracked on until 2013. So he retired from that when he was 65. And his final game, appropriately enough, was Hampshire and Essex, so his old club, playing against Essex. And there's a nice bit to this too, because his first game in professional ranks back in 1966 was also against Essex. Now, on this front, I said there was a link to Bradman's Invincibles because he was born on the day that they were playing Hampshire in 1948. Now, there's a piece on Cricinfo by Bill Riccier, the day that Jesty retired from first-class umpiring, called 6 Degrees of Separation. Not sure how he got this commission. Well played him. But it refers to the fact that Trevor Bailey's final game as captain of Essex was Jesty's first game when they played against each other. Mm-hmm. And if you want to go back in time, Trevor Bailey had been around, since the 50s and so on. But his first major game of cricket was in 1948, at Southend, which was the game where Bradman's Invincibles made their 721 in a day. So Bailey's career spanned that day in 48, the year Jesty was born, and goes all the way up to when he makes his first class debut on the same field as him in 1966. And then from there, he went on to link Bailey to, I think, someone in between, to Bradman, sorry, because Bradman's Invincibles, to Phil Mead, who we've talked about many times as the most runs ever in county cricket, who played with Rhodes, who played with Grace, and he gets everyone back to Grace between Bradman and Grace, and Jesty slots in the middle there, which is quite a nice way of doing that, linking in the chain. I still don't quite know what the 327 is, by the way. It's not his one-day cap. That's 68. Took 372 list day wickets, 340 games for Hampshire. The 327, the best I can come up with was that was the number of runs he made in list day cricket in 1976. I don't think it's that, so I'm going to have to have an extra swing in the confirmations here for Richard Jones. But I'm pretty sure, for all of that, Trevor Jesty, that's his story in cricket, and a mighty one it was for Hampshire.
Sometimes we know the answer without necessarily knowing the number, which might be the case on my next one. I like that he went into umpiring after playing till about 48. He was like, haven't had enough yet. Maybe James Anderson will go into umpiring once he finally wraps up. Can't get away from it. The next number is from Andrew Pelechaty, who was at the live show in Melbourne the other night. It is $1.50, and it comes with a clue.
Okay. I was just thinking about our Discord channel before, which Andrew is very active on, when I had a Big M when driving from the airport to here, had my flavoured milk. Didn't take a photo. Should have taken a photo for our sub chat there about flavoured milk that we're meant to be posting every time, but I did forget. The clue from Andrew is the 1997, and by the way, Andrew loves the milk because he follows the Canberra Raiders, who are sponsored by milk. The 1997 Aussies fill their boots and party with the milk. I didn't even read the clue. More milk. The links this week, the links on this story time. This feels good energy early on.
Up the milk. Yes.
No, the milk.
Yes. Now, some people, you were going off into Australian rules football divergences before. Some people, including Andrew, complain that we don't talk about rugby league on the show. That's because we don't know anything about rugby league. But in this case, I'm going to, because, Adam, cricket is not the only sport that had a high-level administrative split. Anyone who knows league knows about the Super League wars in the 1990s. Didn't involve Kerry Packer, did involve Rupert Murdoch, the two big, rich guns of that era of time, I suppose. I reckon comparatively, Kerry Packer doesn't look quite so bad in retrospect, given that Rupert Murdoch has lived forever and just got more and more evil. At least Kerry Packer clocked out at a reasonable age instead of trying to live to 130 and continue running the world until that point. And you can sort of see what Kerry Packer was about at certain times. He's the comparative graph is a bit more flattering to Packer than it might have been at the time.
I reckon that changed as well. I reckon if you go back 25 years, Jeff, like Murdoch's brand was in better nick than Packer's. But yeah, posthumously, you're right. Packer died in his late 60s. Murdoch will live till he's 120. I know he's given up the executive chairmanship of News Corp, but we all know he's still running the show. Oh, yeah. In that sort of very Succession sort of style. And there is a storyline in Succession about extending people's lives, isn't there, and whether they have the technology to do that. I'm sure Murdoch will be cryogenically frozen at some stage.
Doesn't he have? I'm pretty sure he has some title now, like Chairman Emeritus or some
Chairman Emeritus
wank like that. Just an industrial vat full of wank. It's just incredible.
Well, I mean, Lachlan's not putting him out on the moon, is he? I think that was widely touted as the reason why he didn't get this gig a long time ago. Right? He was given the chance to run Channel 10 for a time and had Queensland newspapers for a time as well. And the sense was that had he been up to it earlier, he would have had it by now. He's kind of last man standing with the rest of the family, distancing themselves from the old man. So I'm sure Rupert, till the day he dies, he'll be deciding the major things at that company for worse, not better.
Yeah, who should be the Prime Minister of certain nations and so on.
Yeah.
Anyway, Super League. Super League is when he tries to take over Rugby League. They have a split so there's the ARL, which is the Australian Rugby League, which is kind of old school, and it is quite like the cricket thing. He wants to professionalise it and make a bunch of money out of it. They've got the Super League, which is the British league, although at the time that we're talking about, they referred to it as the European League, Adam, because they had one team from France. So it's very euphemistic. Basically, all the teams are from Yorkshire or Lancashire, but they have Paris Saint-Germain, who most people know as a round ball football team, did have a rugby league team. So they had one continental, one not hard and fast. rugby league team that came out of France. They folded by 1998, but at the time it was like this was the European Championship of rugby league. And we are looking at 1997 when Paris Saint-Germain is a going entity at that point. So Murdoch sets up the Super League in Australia where he splits it off. He lures some of the ARL teams across. He makes some new teams. And it lasts for one season, and then after that, they broker a peace deal with the ARL, and they form the NRL, the National Rugby League, as it is today, with its $billion-plus broadcast deals and all the rest of it. It's a big sporting entity, particularly in New South Wales and Queensland. So, but while Murdoch's trying to do the Super League thing, every team across both of the Super Leagues, the one in Europe, in inverted commas, and the one in Australia, so 22 teams get involved in this tournament that they call the Super League World Club Championship, where they don't all play each other, but they all play a handful of games. I'm just
thinking they're all in the same country or the same city, NRL Island style, and
NRL Island.
Yep. Yeah. First thing I think.
This is exactly where we're going. So 22 teams. So a bunch of the England teams come out to Australia and play some games, and then some of the Australian teams, I don't know if they all do it at once or if they're staggered, but they have to go to England to play. So they're mostly playing 6 games, so they have to go there and play 3 matches. And a bunch of them go at a similar time, I believe. But they're cooking the books for this because they need to get 8 teams into quarterfinals. But in order to make it look like it's spread across the 2 leagues, they want 4 Australian teams and 4 English/European teams, right? So they insist on that happening, even though the English/European teams are getting absolutely flogged by every Australian side. So the Australian teams, mostly the ones that are now the NRL teams, plus the Auckland Warriors as they were at the time, they dominate. So the Broncos, Brisbane, the Warriors, Cronulla Sharks, the Panthers from Penrith, they're all 6-0. Like they've all just won every game. And there's this other team called the Hunter Mariners.
Sharkies.
I think the Mariners were invented...
Engadine Mackers where he shat himself.
Yeah. I think the Mariners were invented for Super League. I'm not 100% on that, but don't yell at me just because I don't know the history of rugby league off the top of my head. But the Mariners are also 6-0. So that's 5 teams that haven't lost a game, but only 4 of them can make it to the quarters because 4 European teams have to get in. So Penrith misses out. Canberra win 5 games, but they miss out as well. So making the finals from Europe, notionally, are Wigan, who won 2 games out of 6, the London Broncos, who won 1 game out of 6, Paris Saint-Germain, who won 1 game out of 4. I don't know why they didn't have to play 6, but they didn't. And a team called the Bradford Bulls, who didn't win a fucking game. They were 0-6, and they still made the quarterfinals.
What a sport! What a sport, rugby league.
Of the Super League
make it up.
World Club Championship. Well, this is all Murdoch just trying to make up something prestigious, right? So, I mean, God knows what I don't know what the London Broncos were on about, but at least they managed to win 1 game. But nonetheless, the Bradford Bulls, 9-6, they're in there. I don't know how, because there are other teams that did win a game and didn't qualify, so I couldn't figure this out in the time I had available. Anyway, Andrews, Canberra Raiders, they start beautifully at home. They win a game 70-6, they win 66-20, and they win 56-22. So they put 192 points on the board in the first 3 games they've played. And then they go to London, and they're probably drunk or hungover or both, and they lose to the London Broncos, and that's it. So they've got off the plane, they've lost this game, and they know that's it. They know they've got to play 2 more games. They know they've got 2 more weeks over there, and they know they can't qualify for the finals.
Oh dear, that's the longest Mad Monday. And when you consider, gee.
And
what you said before, they do like doing things together. I mean, there's some pretty ordinary human beings doing the rounds in rugby league at the best of times. Backdate that to 1997, pre-social media, pre-camera phones. And for a predilection for all sorts, that would have been fucking horrible. Hate crime stuff.
And it's not the trophy they're interested in anyway. So they do what you assume they will do. They get rugby league drunk. They have 2 weeks to fill. So there's a book by Steve Mascord about the Super League War that has a captain on this. So some of these quotes are coming from that. He quotes Simon Woolford, who was the Raiders hooker and became the captain later. And Woolford's talking about Mel Meninga, who was the coach of the Raiders at the time. Okay, Mel was the coach, and he liked to drink. So we pretty much got straight off the plane and got on the beers for the next 2 or 3 days. Right? This is before their first match. Then they play. So before their first game, they're out in Covent Garden. There are reports of at least one player surfing on the back of a cab, like climbing up onto a black cab and riding it through Covent Garden. Several of the players.
I've got the reference point about Joey Johns skateboarding because on the other side of it with the ARL, Newcastle famously win in '97,
Yep.
and like Daniel Johns rocks up with the Johns brothers the next morning on Today's Show or Sunrise or something, but Joey on the skateboard down the street having had a skinful. I mean, this is akin to that, but on top of a cab.
Yeah. So riding the cab, there's an impromptu police lineup because I don't know how this happens, but somebody gets in a fight with a taxi driver. Not sure, can't put 2 and 2 together there, but so the cops are just lining up Canberra Raiders players in Covent Garden to be like, is this the guy? Is this the guy? Yeah, this is before they've even played their first match and lost it. Anyway, so then they go from London up north where they play Halifax and someone else, and the 1997 Ashes are on, and the Headingley Test is on. The test where Dizzy takes his 7 for in the first innings, Matthew Elliott makes 199, Ponting makes 100, Australia make a squillion, and on the last day, Dizzy gets 2 more, not 3, doesn't get a 10-wicket match despite his 7 for. Paul Rifle takes 5, Australia win by an innings, and a bunch of the Canberra players are there, and this is where it really rugby leagues it up. They storm the field.
It's not rugby league enough. Getting on the tonk for 3 days upon arrival, losing to the only side that hadn't won a game in the entire tournament.
Not the only side. There were a bunch of shit ass sides.
Well, sorry, the only ones that made the quarters or whatever it was, as you were saying before. But having a police line up and a punch on with a cabbie in Covent Garden. They haven't got rugby league drunk as yet.
No, so obviously they have to dress in drag to go to the Test match. That's just that's just de rigueur for 1997 for a bunch of men to really express themselves. So they're all kitted up and they storm the field when the final wicket is taken, and then pretty much just end up straight in the Australian team rooms where they're obviously made to sing True Blue. A player named Jason Death, that is genuinely a guy's name. He's the only one. He gets sent home because he climbs on a table, I think, and performs a move known as the helicopter.
Is this in the Aussie dressing room?
I think it might be publicly visible. I couldn't quite get a beat on where it was, so it might have been at the window. Anyway.
I've just realised that we've made a big blue here, Jeff, with not getting Nick Tuvey on to do special comments on this story. This could not be more one of our most dedicated listeners, I suppose you'd call him, in his wheelhouse, the 1997 rugby league players gone wild in England. But anyway, we've missed that boat now.
Well, the helicopter is a move where I'm going to assume it's I think it came up on Puppetry of the Penis later, where you drop the strides and then establish a circular motion. Not in an actual helicopter is horizontal, the rotor, whereas this is more of a vertical rotor. It's more like, what's the movie? Roy Scheider, who's in Jaws, stars in a movie where he's a helicopter pilot that might be called Cobra or something like that, and he does a sweet trick where he has to do a loop in a helicopter, which is impossible in terms of physics because you can't turn them upside down. But anyway, it's that style. It's a vertical rotor, not a horizontal.
It's also a trick.
Yeah. So that gets Jason Death sent home. To, I don't know, hang out with Philip Nitschke or whatever he was doing. And there's an incident where a bunch of signed bats, there are players trying to steal those. Michael Kasperich loses his baggy green that night, goes missing, never comes back. There's a player called Luke Davico who's making a point of just grossing out Shane Warne because Luke Davico has his mouth smashed open. He's got this busted lip, and he keeps taking Warnie's cigarette and then smoking it and then handing it back to him with blood all over the filter and stuff. And Shane Warne's not up for that. He's like, mate, you keep it. That's yours now. There's a guy called Jason Croker with a fake tooth who's had his tooth knocked out, so he keeps pulling his tooth out and handing it to people. And then Mel Meninga, who's the coach, remember, of this outfit, this is one of the quotes. So we had this competition where Mel had to run with a can of beer in his hand and he had to score a try at the other end of the dressing room. a couple of the cricketers, it might have been the War brothers and Michael Bevan, Michael Slater or someone. I remember a couple of them going in to tackle Mel, and he just drops the hip and shoulder, and bang, they've all gone flying and hit their heads, and Mel slammed the can down and goes, try. So that's good stuff that's going on there. The quote continues. They reckon Steve Waugh had a crook shoulder for months after that, and I think Jason Croker, he picked up Michael Bevan and threw him through the roof. So,
we can ask Bevo about this. Let's not miss the segue here. Live show the 7th of January. Come and see Michael Bevan. Yep. We'll ask him about the day the Canberra Raiders came to town. 97 Ashes.
Did Jason Croker throw you through a ceiling or a roof after the Headingley Test? And it finishes up with Big Jim Wilson, who many people would know for years as the newsreader on Channel 7, who does radio stuff now. So David Coe is one of the players I mentioned earlier, has brought a video camera. And he says, I vividly remember picking up the video camera the next day in the hallway, and it was in bits and pieces, but we salvaged the video and we've got some great footage. So part of which includes this. He says, a bunch of players, we kept going up to Jim Wilson going, Jim, give us a report of the Ashes. You can imagine this happening, you know. So Jim starts off with, what a fantastic day in the Ashes. We shoved it up England's arse. And then you can see Simon Wolford coming from behind him, and he just cuts him in half, tackles him, and they're rolling around everywhere, and the glass of red flies all over the place. Jim and Simon are rolling around on the floor, and Jim's going, where's my red wine? Give me another red wine.
Oh. If only in the 2019 Ashes, when Tony Jones was performing that role as a non-rights holder newshound. No, that's not true. TJ was there with 9 who had the rights. But nevertheless, the news reporter as opposed to the commentary.
Because they didn't have their own commentators over there, did they?
That's it. So I just wish that when Marcus Harris and Matthew Wade, I think I'm right in saying, accosted Jones when doing a cross from the ground at Old Trafford after they retained the Ashes, had they taken him out mid-cross and started punching on with him with a bottle of red, that would have added to the mystique of the occasion. But no, I can imagine that. My great memory of Jim Wilson when I was a kid was that every time the Good Friday Appeal was on, he would do a rendition of the haka in the tally room. If you read out my pledge, I'll double it kind of energy from that era when there was 4 TV stations and you watch what you were given.
Literally, as we're having this conversation, I'm sitting on the balcony which faces the street, and a couple of dudes, maybe about 21, went running by, one of them in a shopping trolley and the other one pushing it as fast as he could down the hill. So, the energy is here right now. So that's when the Milk partied with the Australian team, and the reason that it's 150, I think, is that the Canberra Raiders in that competition went 5-1. They went 1-5, 1 loss, 5 wins. So I'm going to put that as my 1-5 for the 150.
Nice.
And that is Andrew Pelechaty's number. Even if it's not the number, that's definitely the story. If you want to send us a nerd pledge, very easy to do. Patreon.com/thefinalword.
Final word story time 164. Yes, that's right. We've done this 164 times where Jeff and I have sat down together and told the stories of cricket past. The first time that Jeff and I have recorded an episode of this for a little while. The last time it was one of these, it was Brat and Daniel hosting in our absence. We didn't get one out last week.
We've only done it 163 times, actually.
That's true. To be fair, by the time this goes out, everyone would have heard 163, which we did record. But the point stands that we are now very much back in the saddle as we power on into 2024. And our third number today is one that I'll be dealing with from Peder Roberts. It's 78 Swedish krona. It comes with an interesting clue.
Peter says this because I think his answers previously have generally involved that northern part, the icy lands of the north of Europe. He says, I've updated with a new pledge of 78 for a wicketkeeper goalkeeper with an unusual transnational backstory. No Scandinavia link. His combination of countries is unusual enough as it is. Really appreciate having so many cheerful podcasts at the gloomiest time of year over this way. Yeah, there is a distinct lack of daylight up in that part of the world at this time of year. So we're glad if we can open a ray of sunshine. And we've done a lot of wicketkeeper goalkeeper stuff, Adam. We talked about Rebecca Rolls, who did both those jobs for New Zealand, for the women's teams. We had, the name escapes me at the moment, but the player who was doing it for Bahamas, was it, relatively recently, who was doubling up with both sets of gloves. And we've had a few others in our period of time as well. We had Gregor. Now his last name's escaped me as well. Who was doing it for Scotland in the early 1900s. My mind's saying Gregor Samsa, but that's the guy from the Metamorphosis who turns into a cockroach, so that is not the same thing. Gregor McGregor. There we go.
Gregor McGregor. I was going to say.
That's why I forgot, because he only had one name.
Yeah, like Donald McDonald and Gregor McGregor. They should go out for a pint. Well, I can't do that because Gregor McGregor's dead, but
yes.
I suppose Donald McDonald will one day perish as well.
They can meet on the other side.
In heaven.
I'll meet you on God's golden shore.
Well, as we move into this, I just want to say this is a belter of a pledge, and this is where our Nerd Pledge CSI crew come into their own. When I kind of mentioned this to a few of them in our little WhatsApp group, they jumped at the chance to decode this clue. I mentioned Sean McGiven on Storytime 163. I didn't mention Matt May, and he was offended by that, but Matt's part of it, Glenn Finkield, Brat's Underation occasionally. They do good work with us in collaboration with Pat Rogers. Can't forget the great Pat Rogers. I want to interview Pat Rogers about his book soon, Jeff. That's my next book club. Anyway, Pat doesn't know that, but hi, Pat, if you're listening. He will be. Pat listens. I know that. But yes, where we got to was a very nice place indeed. A chap by the name of Spiros Spiropoulos. Spiropoulos. I'll get quicker as we go. Spiropoulos.
All right.
He was born in 1959, and he went on to have one of these big goalkeeping careers that you referred to before. Greek.
Just on the name, so if we're doing our etymology, the polis being the people or the city, metropolis kind of thing. But econ, ECON, I mean, just makes me think economy. So surely his name just means business district, right? Central Business District.
That's good.
Spiros CBD.
Yeah, and he didn't as Peter says, it's not like he grew up in Sweden. If it was a Sweden-Greece link, I would have really enjoyed that. But it's not. I did spend a Christmas in Sweden many years ago, 2011, and I remember getting pretty pissed on Christmas Day, as is the custom in that part of the world. They don't fuck around in Scandinavia around Christmas. And Ed Cowan was making his test debut on Boxing Day against India at the MCG. And I called a dear friend of the show, Matt Clemo, went pissed and said, Clemo, mate, I've never not seen an Australian on debut reach three figures. This is when Cowan's on about 50. I said, if he gets to 95, you are to call me. I'm leaving my phone on. You ring me. And the call never came because, of course, he was out for 70-something called down the league side.
Yeah, 72 maybe.
Yeah, 70-ish. But anyway, I remember that Christmas fondly for the lack of sunlight and all the other quirks being that
lack of sufficient food to offset everything. Did you throw Michael Bevan through a roof at any stage?
No, sadly not. Sadly not. We I wonder whether he's been to Sweden before. He would have done well there. Right, so back to Spiros. Born in 1959, big goalkeeping career, Greek. The name gives that away, right?
Did guess that, yeah.
I'm just going to skip from 1959 to 1978, a year that I'll come back to later in a roundabout kind of way. Well, he made his debut for AEK Athens, big football club there, in 1977 as a teenager, because there was a players' strike and they were desperate, and they called him up from the juniors and he made his debut, and he played through 78 and they won the league. So, he played his part in winning the competition in 1978. And in the absence of anything deeper into this that sufficiently satisfies the number from Peter, I'm going to guess that that's why we're going to be dealing with 78 here, because in his first proper season of professional football, Spiros won the comp with AEK Athens. Right. It's probably something else, but that's good enough to continue telling the story.
Sure.
He went on to play there for 19 years. One club, proper one club hero. So rare, right? Professional football, they jump around often. It's very uncommon to play for one club all the way through, but he did. He wasn't always in the starting team either. He was so bloody loyal. Like, he was the Greek goalkeeper for 12 matches between 1984 and 1989. His debut was an away game in East Germany in 1984. Like, there's some romance to that in retrospect. I mean, I'm sure his hotel room was being bugged and the Stasi were, monitoring their every move. But still, it's something quirky about having played a game of international sport in a country that by definition does not exist anymore. But even through all of that, they're so strong, AEK Athens, in their goalkeeping ranks that he's not always in the team. But he does play a huge role in 1988-89, the years we were talking about earlier with Jesty, where he won those back-to-back pennants with Lancashire in the one-day comp. Well, in the 88-89 football season, AEK win the comp for the first time in 11 years from that first season that he played in 77-78. And Spiros was central to that. He was the main goalkeeper throughout the course of that season. Spiros Spiropoulos, just wanted to say that again. Very satisfying name to say now once you get the hang of things. He kept knocking about in that squad until 1996 when he finished up as a 37-year-old. But how does all of this link back to wicket keeping? I can hear you ask down the Riverside screen, Jeff.
Yep.
Well, you know how I said I'm going to start the story at 1978? What if we don't start it? What if we go all the way back? Spiros, hero of AEK, all-timer at that club, actually began his life in Kiama in Australia until he was 11 years of age. He grew up in Australia, never played football at all. He was a wicketkeeper. And I listened to a part of a podcast that he did and read an article right up of it as well when doing the research for this answer. He said that because of his upbringing, he just played cricket. Oh, no, he was an Australian kid. He didn't really think about playing football or soccer as it would have been known, and how little, I suppose, how little football there was. I didn't actually go to check. Where is Kiama, Jeff? Kiama, isn't it? Kiama. New South Wales?
I'm looking it up right now because I was curious.
Okay. While you're looking it up,
I kind of know. It is in New South Wales, but I can't remember which bit. Like I kind of it's
South
familiar
Coast,
enough.
I feel like Bega kind of energy to it, possibly. While you're doing that, and you got your phone out at the moment, I'll tell you the next bit of this.
South Coast. Yeah,
South Coast. There we go. So Kiama. I called it Kiama before. Kiama, of course. I can
just down the road from Jamboree, near Shell Harbour. So down from Port Kembla a ways.
Okay. We've got some context now.
And north of 7 Mile Beach.
Okay, so north of 90 Mile Beach as well, in that case. Fairway north
Presumably,
of that. Always love that we call it a beach, 90
much
Mile
bigger
Beach. Very Australian.
No, it's not. Is it 90 miles?
I don't know.
Does it go for 90 miles?
Sea spray?
That's a long way. It's a long way.
Yeah.
I mean,
you look at it on the map, it is dead straight for 90 Mile, and it does look like beach when you... this isn't the Final Word Geography podcast, clearly, because neither of us would do very well on that.
But if you're calling a beach 7 Mile Beach, then you're thinking that 7 is notable enough to name a beach after it, which means 90 is a lot further along than 7. Was it just a huge act of one-upmanship? Oh, nice beach you got there. How long is it? 7 miles. Oh, interesting. Got a new name for this place.
Very, well, I'm tipping these beaches would have been named before Federation.
Right.
Maybe George Coulthard had a hand in this. Goes, 7 Mile Beach.
7 Mile Beach.
I fucking fought off a shark in the water in Shark Island. I'll give you the 90 Mile Beach in Victoria, where I'm from.
It's
anyway,
it's 130 kilometres south of Sydney. There you go. That's Kiama.
Okay, that'll do. So he's a wicketkeeper, right? Mm-hmm. And when he rocks up in Greece to go to school and he's an 11-year-old, I assume rather the family just moved back to their home country.
Yeah.
They said, what do you do? What's your sport? He goes, I can catch the ball really well. Can't kick it, but I can catch it. They go, all right, well, you're the goalkeeper. They probably didn't speak with an Australian accent.
Yeah.
He would have spoken with an Australian accent. But
there was a lot of Greek-Australian crossover by that point. So you sort of...
But not in Greece. Not in Greece there wouldn't have been.
But back and forth, because ramping up from the late 40s, you have a lot of Greeks who come over here and are then born here and so on, and then shuffle back, and there's that Athens-Melbourne connection. So, there might have been... There probably would have been some people in Greece who'd spent a fair bit of time over here as well.
True. I was reading a little bit about that wave of migration the other day, actually, in reference to the anniversary of Harold Holt's death. I just, as I do, I got kind of fixated on this for a couple of hours and read about the work he did as immigration minister to Menzies in the post-war era, and how quite important he was in opening minds to the idea that we actually needed to proceed with this migration program to help fill the country. How the world has changed to think that a Conservative government were advancing this cause, and now the position most Conservatives around the world is to lock the door. What was Trump saying last week? Anyway.
Poisoning the blood of our country. Yeah.
Poisoning the blood of our country. Sounds, how sometimes
familiar.
you get in trouble for comparing things to a certain regime from the 30s in a certain part of Europe.
Having done a lot of reading of propaganda from that era in my life, it really just rings a lot of similar bells, that's all.
So moving from Harold Holt back to Spiros. So it's the simple story is this: he became the goalkeeper because he was the wicketkeeper in Australia, which he fully credits to his professional footballing career. that being an Aussie cricket fan helped him become a Greek goalkeeper, purely down to the fact that he loved catching the ball, and he just translated those skills over. And he also said he watched a bit of football on TV in Australia as a kid, so he loved Manchester United. Presumably it was the early days of SBS, although I'm not even sure SBS was around, because this would have been the 60s, right? He's born in 59.
Yeah, Whitlam introduces SBS, I'm pretty sure.
Whitlam does, right. Yeah, of course he does. So that's 72. So we're pre-SBS, so I'm not sure what network was carrying English football, but he caught some of that on telly in the early days of TV in Australia. He was known as the Aussie kid, as you'd expect over there, and he learnt everything on the fly at school. By 17, as we discussed already, he's scouted by AEK, and then we've already detailed that career. Yeah, why 78? Maybe that first strike-breaking season of 77, 78, where they were successful. There's another wicket-keeping link, though, Jeff. This is a bit cheeky, but we'll do it anyway. A man by the same name, exactly the same name, Spiros Spiropoulos. When you start Googling Spiros Spiropoulos, as our Nerd Pledge CSI crew were doing when helping me with some of the parts of this answer, they dug up a feature written by a man of that name a few years ago in his capacity as the programming director of the Melbourne Queer Film Festival. Looking at the pic, I don't think Spiros from that is old enough to have been born in 1959. However, there is a reference in that piece to the 78ers, our number being 78, which is the original Mardi Gras, which was a horrible affair where the police beat the shit out of those who were marching in 1978. And if you want to go one stretch further, the number works with 78, the 78ers, and the journo who wrote the feature on the other Spiro, his name's Matthew Wade.
Huh.
So we've got two different Spiros Spiropouloses who have got 78 and wicket-keeping stuff going on.
Okay.
Different generations, but I thought I'd do that on the way out. And yeah, the original Spiro. I love the idea that cricket was his path to professional football. You've already said the others who've done so. We were talking about Andy Gorham only 6 months ago, the great Rangers keeper who played list A cricket for Scotland, albeit as an all-rounder rather than a wicket-keeper. I wonder how he would have gone had Andy Gorham became a wicket-keeper, given what a brilliant footballer he was and had that career that went all the way through the 90s with Rangers and Scotland and reflexes, similar skill set. But anyway, great yarn. Thanks to Peter for giving us the chance to tell it. Peder Roberts, 78 Swedish krona. Let me know what the real 78 is, and thank you to the guys on WhatsApp for steering me towards the bits of that helped us solve it.
Andy Gorham, I imagine if he'd been playing sort of a level down, he would have been keeping wicket. If it was that bit where you just cast around for who is the most coordinated person in the team.
Right.
Then he would have had it locked. But I suppose playing actual list A cricket, you've got an actual full-time wicket-keeper who's not going to be displaced by somebody who's popping in and out between their football career. Just
a great yarn. So thank you, Peter, for sending it our way, and to our Nerd Pledge CSI guys for helping me on my way with it too. Last number of this episode, Jeff. Mike Dunn. That's the kind of name you can set your watch to. Like he swam at the Olympics in 1964 and won a medal for Australia. Mike Dunn, 2:38. 2.38, I should specify.
Yep.
There is no clue on this one, which means it looks like a free swing. Have fun with it.
Yeah, it's $2.38, and I know from a bit of correspondence with Mike Dunn over the years, I'm very confident he's got a New Zealand fondness, New Zealand soft spot. I don't think he lives in New Zealand anymore, but comes from that part of the world originally, I think. Which means that I think this might be the same answer as a number from Hamish Stairs, the man whose name is a sentence, who's had a few nerd pledges come through in his time, which would be the 238 runs made in an innings by Big Daddy Kane Williamson when he made the 238 against Pakistan that won New Zealand a test match that got them into the World Test Championship final when Australia botched it with their slow over rate, the first WTC that New Zealand went on to win.
I remember watching a lot of that. That was when I was in hotel quarantine, Jeff, in Perth, and that was the test series that was on, and therefore that was the cricket we were watching.
So, yes, whatever there was whatever you could get, and Australia managed the fraction of a point deduction or whatever it was that ended up seeing them bump down to third spot. It was a good observation. I was talking on the Daily Show about chatting with Alex Malcolm in the press box during the Perth Test. Good observation from him about the slow over rate thing as well, which was simply that all the time in cricket, we're always talking about the bowling side wanting to get what they can out of the pitch in the first session, or there might be a little bit in it early, is the kind of thing that you hear time and time again, that there'd be a bit more moisture, a bit more freshness. On a batting wicket, you want to make the most of the early overs, right? And he posed the question, which is a very good question: why would you not be going to every effort to get as many overs as possible in before lunch? Like, why would you not be trying to bowl every possible delivery and give yourself some time to waste late in the day when you're, all the life's gone out of the pitch and maybe the batting side's having a more comfortable time of it? Like, why do you want to be bowling more overs at them in the third session than you are in the first?
And playing catch-up, which is never good for the energy. So when you've got a spinner on trying to get through overs in 90 seconds to make up your over rate, and you're knackered as it is, it gives your fast bowler less time to rest down the other end when presumably they're in rotation with your spinner. And I couldn't agree more. It's like just bad resource allocation, I suppose. Whereas if you get 30 overs or even more than 30 overs in before lunch and really push it, it builds flexibility and puts you under less pressure later. I don't know why. I mean, I do know why, because it's like that thing, you probably know that you've explained it better than I have in the past. If you're given a certain amount of time, if you're given a 4-hour deadline, you will take 4 hours to write the article. If you're given a 40-minute deadline, you'll write the article in 40 minutes, and there will be negligible difference between the two pieces of writing.
Right. Yeah, I suppose so. The job expands to fill the time available. But given that you have to do the full day's bowling anyway, the point of not making the most of potentially better bowling conditions seems a very useful one. Anyway, overrates, things that we like to talk about that no one else wants to hear about. Kane Williamson is now up to 29 Test hundreds, so he's almost, there's that, the Bradman 2900s thing is something that sort of lingers in the memory for a lot of people, I think, and so then going into the 30s is that's what the modern greats started to do, because nobody had more than Bradman's 29 back in the day. Yeah,
I feel like when Steve Waugh reached 29, that was the same day he brought up 10,000 Test runs, that famous day at Sydney in 2003. I was corresponding with a listener of ours today, Christy, who was at our live show in Melbourne, and said that she was there at Sydney in 2003. I'm like, well, so was I. Like, that's a real thing. But that was Steve Waugh. Being his 29th made it even more special again, because it pulled level with Bradman, and, we all know what happens after that.
Yeah. So 400s this year, Kane Williamson. Did that in 5 innings as well, which is kind of ridiculous. So the one that he made in Bangladesh the other week was his 3rd in consecutive innings, even though the previous 2 innings were in March. So he went 2 in March and then 1 at the next time of asking in December. But anyway, I have talked about that 238 before, so I just wondered who else made a 238, and what would you know? Walter Reginald Hammond. Yeah. Wally Hammond made a 238 not out, Adam, at Kensington Oval on January the 8th, 1926 for the touring MCC
here we go.
On the very tour where things started to go wrong for a young Wally Hammond. They just got there as well, so this is early in the tour. So the first fixture is January 1 against the Barbados Colts team. Then they play a game against a full Barbados team. And then by the 8th of January, they're playing a game against a full West Indies team. So they just ramp up and ramp up. They're all in Barbados. They're all at the same ground at Kensington Oval. And then after the West Indies game, which is not a test, it's not designated as a test match, but it's against a West Indies representative team, they go back to playing another full Barbados team. So they play Barbados twice either side of this non-test match. And in the non-test match, England the MCC make this huge score of 597, declared 8 wickets down, and 238 not out is Wally Hammond's contribution to that. Pretty good team. Percy Holmes is in that team, Roy Kilner, Lionel Tennyson. They nearly win that match. They probably should have won that match. So they bowl out West Indies team for 147 and then have them 21 for 6 when they run out of time at the end of the 4th day, but it's only a 4-day game. So Wally is not required to bowl much, bowls a few overs, doesn't take a wicket, does take 5 catches across the 2 innings. And it just made me wonder, okay, he's a lad of 22. And if you put this in context here, the second Barbados game, he doesn't make many in that game. He doesn't make many in the first Barbados game. The first Barbados game, they get smashed by an innings. The second Barbados game, they barely hold on for a draw. This is the MCC team. So they get dominated by Barbados, even though they dominate the game against the West Indies side. And even the Barbados Colts game, Wally Hammond's out for 1, and they draw it in a couple of days they can't even beat the Colts team. So if you look across his tour, so he leads the tour averages with 48, but a lot of that rides on the red ink from the 238 not out. The rest of the tour, so across the whole tour, 732 runs, but that's in 18 innings. So he makes like a third of his tour runs in this one innings. And his only other 100 comes against British Guiana, which is probably not a huge fixture at the time. And it just made me think, Adam, this feels like the one, right? It's the big game. He's made the big double. He heads out celebrating, lets loose, makes a bad decision or a series of bad decisions, and surely this is the innings that contracts syphilis for Wally Hammond.
I mean, it would suggest so. I mean, I know you haven't kind of gone through the deterioration in his series numbers, but purely down to what you're describing there about so much of the average being informed by this one big hit. Well, yeah, maybe this was the one big hit, and which cost him the 2026 season when his cock nearly fell off. And this deserves a book to be written about it. You know, the Bradman's War, which did really well. That was a book that was released a long time ago now. Maybe it should be Wally's trip to Barbados. His own, as Donald Trump, as we talked about earlier, described. Described the AIDS pandemic as his personal Vietnam? Was what he?
That's true. Yes, I think that's what
this was Wally Hammond's personal war. Okay, interesting.
Well, you know, it just made me think. It just made me wonder, and also, you know, we make a lot of fun of Wally Hammond, but I did have a pang of understanding where I thought, you know, whomst amongst us, a 22-year-old on your first joint overseas, contracting some sort of venereal disease, like there, but for the grace of God, for most of the rest of us in this world, I would have thought.
I should correct the record by saying, by the way, I just Googled it then. Trump said that contracting STDs when he was single, as was his personal Vietnam. He said it to Howard Stern, which, you know, it all lines up, doesn't it? It's
a confusing line in terms of what, you know, trying to actually divine what that actually means. But yes, it was a different time back then, and various precautionary items were far less readily available, particularly for young and gormless cricketing schoolboys just about being sent off to the other side of the world, full of excitement and vim and the desire to embrace life to the fullest. So anyway, it's just a little bell that was rung. Was that a significant innings in the life of Wally Hammond in a way that went beyond the numbers?
Well, thank you, Mike Dunn, for helping us get to the bottom of all of this. That's a worthwhile research piece there, Jeff. Nicely done by you. That's the end of the numbers for today. As you said earlier, patreon.com/the final word. We're going to be continuing to make so many episodes of Storytime throughout the course of 2024. If you wish to be part of that as a pledger, all you do is jump on that Patreon page, pop in your number. You don't have to give a clue. Indeed, often it's better when you don't give a clue, because that means we can have a bit of a free swing and you get 2 bites of the cherry. You come back on the revisit shows and so on. And it also gets you access to the Discord channel, the nicest place on the internet, I would argue, in the entire cricketing world. There is so much work going on behind the scenes at the moment for the Vietnam, the Edinburgh half marathon and marathon. Fuck me, our Vietnam. No, the Edinburgh marathon and half marathon in late May, the late May bank holiday of 2024. Don't miss out on that. This is going to be really good. I know that right now, when you're listening, you've probably had an indulgent week, Christmas, Boxing Day, staying up late if you're in the UK. And you might be in the market to run something in Scotland in May. Well, no better time than to get the running shoes out than January. And instead of joining a gym and taking up a membership that will sit there gathering dust within 3 or 4 weeks, instead
that will keep charging on your credit card periodically for the next 14 years because you can never resign.
Right. Instead, just grab yourself some running shoes, find a way you can train up and get ready. And it doesn't take that long to prepare for a half marathon. Like, it can be overplayed a little bit, whisper it. If you've got a base level of fitness, you can probably do it straight away. If you don't, a couple of months tops. If you don't, and the 10K is available as well. We've got a few people running the 10K who've never done running before. That is very, very achievable in a couple of months. There's the Couch to 5K. And that's 30 days, I think, from memory, Jeff. If you could do that 30-day couch to 5K, you can do then the extra 5K. Adrenaline will get you through comfortably. That's on a Saturday morning. We'll have a lovely time watching you. We will probably watch some cricket on Saturday afternoon. We will run on Sunday. We will go out on Sunday night. It will be brilliant. There's a fundraiser coming up in January. Don't miss this opportunity to be part of something wonderful for the Lord's Taverners, who do such wonderful work in our cricketing community now for over 7 decades. We're trying to raise 30 grand for them. It would be a mighty achievement, but I believe we can do it.
Mm-hmm. Got to have big goals if you want to kick big goals. I don't know. I'm out of words. I'm done. This is. Yeah.
Who had big goals? Seabus superannuation 40 years ago. They had big goals.
Yep.
Big returns.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Yep. I was just expecting you to do a Hawthorn link somehow or other. But there it is. It is the end of year. It's a historic episode, an episode where we spoke about the sport of rugby league. And it is now the end of 2024. But there'll be the New Year's Eve episode where we do our bests and worsts, as is now traditional on the final word. And then we launch into a new year with all of you, hopefully, by our sides. Lots of love. Thanks for being with us this year, and we'll see you soon.